Weinberg here with People Power TV, my friend and collaborator, Francis DellaVecchia, who is chief strategist and working on a bunch of stuff related to the project. But we're just going to have a great exploration, a deep dive on what we're up to, what he's up to, where Francis came from, and just give people a view and inside sense or a better sense of what's inside the project, who's inside the project, and I guess inspire people to see how different people can be involved in something like this and what kind of team it takes to make People Power come to life. Welcome, Francis.
Hi, thank you. It's great to be here.
Right on. So, what came to mind right off the bat as we were just chatting about it a little bit was, and I'd love to hear more of your original story in politics, where you were before it got into politics, and then how you got into politics and what that looked like. Because we're kind of doing something like that again.
Yeah. So, my first introduction to something really political was I was about 15 years old. And there was a talk at the UN around nuclear non-proliferation. And there was a massive rally, march, and then concert in Central Park. And I lived in New Jersey. It's where I grew up. And so I went with a friend of mine, and we sat in the street with thousands and thousands of people. They had speakers in the streets of Manhattan, big, massive, bass woofer speakers that were broadcasting what was going on inside the UN, what the talks were. And there were thousands of people listening to what the people were saying. And then we all got up and we went on this massive march, thousands of people to Central Park, where in the end, it was 500,000 people for the concert that was listening to Jackson Browne and Bruce Springsteen and all these folks all around No Nukes. And I was like, oh, I had been someone who, we're talking 1980 at this point. I had been already at age 15, a student of what had gone on in the 60s, my perception of what had gone on in the 60s, how the youth had essentially said, you need to listen to us. We are the cultural change agents. You need to pay attention to what we say. There's more of us than there are of you now. And so you got to check out what we're doing. We're going to change the direction of society. And being a member of Gen X, which was then like the smallest generation ever, we're like, we want to do something too. And no, there was nobody around to listen to us.
Yep, we're all just punks doing new wave, right? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So finally, it's like, wow, there's all these people out there. And it was a turning point for me in what was possible and how people could be motivated to action and what would take them to be motivated. And I ended up studying theater at UCLA, but always politics. Like my choice was, am I going to study politics, international relations at Berkeley, or am I going to study theater at UCLA? And in the end, I decided theater at UCLA for various reasons, but politics was always a part of my life. I always felt like even my theater was, my theater that I followed was Bertolt Brecht theater. It was theater is a weapon. Politics is how you live your life. That's politics. Every act is political. Every act is a political act. And that's the way I've lived my entire life. And right after then college, it was the very first American Iraq War, the first Persian Gulf War, where I was part of the peace organizing committees and organizing the students and doing guerrilla theater and trying to stop there from being a war. And I was actually it was on Martin Luther King Day in downtown LA. We had done some political theater in conjunction with this massive protest. Hundreds of us got arrested, and it was from inside. There was they put us below the federal building in downtown LA. There was a male cell and a female cell, hundreds of us in each cell. It was where they usually kept immigration detainees. And that's where we learned that the first bombs had dropped in the war, while I was down there with folks like Blaise Bonpane singing "We Shall Overcome" and things like this. So it was very, very powerful. We could hear the women singing. We were singing with them. We couldn't see them. And during those protests, actually, at the time I had long curly hair, and I was definitely looking the part of political rebellion. And after one of these rallies that I had spoken at, Ron Kovic came up to me, who young people may not know, but at the time was a big deal. He had been in a film about him, Born on the 4th of July, had been made. He was a Vietnam veteran, peacenik. And he came up to me after I was done talking and after the event was starting to filter out. And he said, "Wow, for a minute, I thought you were Abby Hoffman up there." And that was like, for me at the time, that was like the most amazing compliment I ever could have gotten in my entire life. Like, wow, really? Like, I was channeling that. That's amazing. So fast forward a bit to the end of the 80s, and now I've done a lot of theater. I've done some film. I've been largely in entertainment. And we concocted this show that could be interactive from one city to another, meaning the idea was we were doing a show, and this is a theater show, that had forks in the narrative. And depending on how the audience reacted, the players would take different forks.
Cool.
And we concocted it in a way that you could be the audience reacting in another city. So the idea was, we had, at the time, you would need something like a T1 line in order to pull this off with the bandwidth. But we did it so that you could be at the Adelaide Festival in Australia. We could be performing it, and an audience in Missouri could be deciding what was going on stage in Australia. And to us, I was like, wow, we could pull this off. And that fed to with some
live choose your adventure.
Live choose your adventure on another continent, right? Like, okay, so this is beginning to be possible on the internet. If we can start to look at this. And we thought about some of my tech friends and my politics friends, like, we could run a different kind of political campaign. We could run a campaign that was interactive. We could run a campaign that wasn't just a candidate bullhorning messages and trying to get people in and like spending millions of dollars on ads. And we said, let's dream up a campaign that's interactive over the web. Even though at the time, bandwidth wasn't there. Most people were still on 28K baud modems. Exactly. We said, so when is the internet going to be ready? When's the tech going to be ready? And what office should we run for? And when would it be? And we decided, like, we think the tech will be there right around 2001. All right, what office? Well, Mayor of LA is open, and Mayor of LA actually has some really unique benefits. There's no parties in LA municipal politics because it was so corrupt in the 30s that actually on a ballot now in Los Angeles, it does not say under someone's name, Democrat, Republican, or anything else. It just says their name and their occupation.
Is it still like that now?
Yeah. And you don't have to get past a party primary. Now California has open primaries anyway, but then you didn't need to get past a party primary to get on the ballot, and you'd be on the same ballot with everybody else. So the year and then we're like, okay, so who's gonna be the guinea pig? Who's gonna run for office? And nobody else put up their hand, so I put up my hand. I'll be the guinea pig. I'll run for office. Let's do it. How do we make this national news? Well, let's webcast the whole thing. let's webcast from the day we announce everything that has to do with the campaign. We'll webcast all of it. And so, and could we make this, is this an office we could win? Well, yeah, actually, if we get 100,000 votes, we could probably get past the primary. It's only that many votes in a city of 4 million. Like, we might be able to pull this off. So we ran this campaign, we webcast, which meant shoulder mounted cameras, satellite modems, ridiculousness. So few people could see the video, but we were creating an archive. We created this amazing archive, and we would do things like ride the buses one day with the cameras and the satellite modems, live cast, but also tape it, of course. So we had it available, and we would interview bus drivers. Hey, you've been driving this bus for 10 years. What would you do to improve mass transit in LA? Hey, you've been riding this bus for 5 years now. What would you do to change mass transit in LA? Trains. And then we would talk to fire people and police officers. And we went into City Hall and we talked to civil service workers, and we went to schools and talked to teachers and students, and really created a forum for how could you make LA better? And then we put it together in what we call the Sustainable City Plan, which had 5 pillars to the plan, which addressed police reform, housing and homelessness, education and environment, and one other thing that I'm forgetting right now. But
same problems we have today, right?
Exactly. But the policies came from the people, right? And that was really the point. It was, we had ideas and we said, okay, here's our pillars, but within those, now let's listen to what the people are asking for and how they would improve it. Now, we didn't have the technology at our hands to do anything with that other than create a great media repository, where if you wanted to bother and look and go on, from Friday, June 21st, and you knew that that bus rider was saying something, you could go and find it. But we didn't have a way to actually get the people's best ideas to bubble up or anything like that. We didn't have access to it. So fast forward, now I'm going to skip over a lot of my life, which includes more entertainment and raising money for startups and all kinds of interesting things, and working on a presidential campaign for Dennis Kucinich as his Southern California field director for a while, and working on nonprofits and getting marijuana legal, and all these
movement was movement building exercise, right?
All of it, right? So now take all that experience to now, and Scott, my friend of many years now, and who we've worked on a couple interesting projects together, and he says, I just came back from my cross-country trip, and I've been looking for solutions, and sometimes with you, Francis, for how we get to the big solutions. And he's like, I think I found it. I think it's participatory democracy. It's deliberation. It's citizen assembly. I think that's what we got to do. And I said, interesting, because if we would have known about this 22 years ago now, it's what we would have done rather than run around with shoulder mounted cams and build a media repository.
If you also had the internet and the web and Zoom, the rest of it too, right? But even the local piece, it's curious. Everything that we're looking at now could have been implemented 100 years ago in some ways.
Right. So now we're at a place where we have the tools to, yes, do great interviews like this and get people's recordings and all of that. And we understand the tools that with facilitation and with some tech tools, we can really have these ideas bubble up and then get them enacted. So to me, it's a very clear natural progression from where I was all those years ago, and now utilizing many of my honed skills that I have in the intervening 2 decades around organizing and fundraising and how to light people up and get them engaged. So that's a little bit of what I'm doing here.
And why it's such a natural fit. I mean, we even started, I think it's been 10 years since we did the food collabs, engaging people in Southern California
to be in conversations
about different people from different stakeholder groups, farmers, people dealing with feeding the poor or the elderly. I mean, it was a full spectrum, farmers and whatever, all together talking about how would we really upgrade the food system, and had a little mini experiment in deliberation with an audience and a Q&A. Did that twice and saw, the constraints and the limitations of it. Would have been a cool conversation series to continue, but still like this pending idea of how does this turn into power and impact? Not quite ripened then. And, I've been dancing with some of the similar ideas around this for a while, even talked about this for my political campaign in 2016, and really was like, oh, you already did this? Come on in, Francis, in 2016, running for Senate opposite, I guess, Kamala Harris at the time, right? Or was it? No, was it?
Wasn't her yet.
It was, who was it? I forget who I was running at the time. Oh, for Senate, right? Oh, no, it was. She became the senator, right? And it was, I think she was senator at that point, and she had been appointed or something, but it was still in that run of things. I think that was the moment. Anyway, also close, but not quite with the full toolkit. And this difference that happened this year of just really seeing all the pieces kind of fall in place. And more than anything, this model of Taiwan actually implementing it with hundreds of thousands of people participating was really like that. Oh, hold on, they did this? This is not like a little speculative citizen assembly that gets ignored by government. This is like hundreds of thousands of citizens participating and making it happen, really landed in a different way. And then asking all these people, what's the super solution for all the meta crisis, the disaster we're facing, and not getting an answer, and feeling like, okay, we got the answer. And then the TV show idea, right? We're going to turn this into a big hit show. How are we going to get people to do it? All of it starts to come together. One thing I actually want to point out is how we're really, having to do this from scratch. We wind up getting into these roles of a lot of administrative function, and we spend most of our time meeting and talking about business decks and plans, financials, how to reach people, strategy. I don't think this is, when you're doing a lot of the strategy with me, like I've found through these, like this last year especially, how we really work in great synergy between your canny, pragmatic, New Jersey, like, okay, hold on, what are you really saying? How's that really going to work? There's something complicated in there you're not paying attention to, Scott. And so we have this business jam, right? That startup really requires, even if you have the dream of doing like the storytelling and the theater of this, I think we both do, that we're in like the minutia. And just to give me a glimpse of what your experience has been over the last 6 months of like what you've been doing in this and where you see it progressing and where you see it going, just so people can get an idea of what's on the inside.
Yeah, that's a great question, because, I think both of us share, among many things we share in common, is a desire to build something that is sustainable, and beyond sustainable, regenerative, right? And having worked in nonprofit, my biggest one being with the Marijuana Policy Project, and seeing that, and my job there was to get them notoriety so that they could raise a bunch more money, quite frankly, and throw them events so that we could raise a bunch of money and do various things, which all came back to how do we raise a bunch of money. It's much more enticing to think about how do we make something that is generative of its own funding, that people are participating in, want to participate in, makes money, shows value to its stakeholders, etc., without needing to go back to donors, because donors might go away at some point, so not being beholden to donors. But also there's something very powerful, especially in the United States of America, of just people respect things that are presented as businesses in a way that they don't respect things that are not, quite frankly. This country, by and large, respects business and revenue generating business. And a lot of what Scott and I have been noodling on is, how does revamping democracy fit into a business model that is not only sustainable, but generative? Where does the revenue come from? What is viable? And how do you convince first the people that are involved that it is viable, next that we believe we can build something that's viable, and then can we get investors to go out on the limb with us in uncharted territory, right?
Yeah.
Because we know at large in this day and age in tech, we know that things at scale will find a way to generate revenue. That's the question, is how do you get to scale, and what do you use to get to scale, and why do people care enough about it that it does scale? And then when you do get to scale, how do you then generate revenue in a way that's not extractive?
Yeah.
Right? Because even at scale, what is the easiest way to get to revenue is 100% extractive. Use people's data, often without their knowing it, and make money off of them without them knowing that you're making money off of them.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, at all stages of this, we're up against things that the tried and true way to do it, largely in tech world, is not only not serving what we'd like to do, but is in many ways antithetical to the whole point of the mission.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a lot of what we've been noodling on, and we think we get it, and we think we're there, and then it's like, no, that's not quite it. That fails on this test, or it fails on that test, and so we revamp and do it again. And that's been a lot of what's been happening, much to the chagrin of some of our team members and partners who would love for us to have, figured this all out a few months ago and said, like, here's a business model that's going to work, and we know the money's going to come from here, here, and here, and here's how we're going to make money, and here's how we start making money from day one once we get dollars in, and here's how it's going to go, and here's how everybody gets paid. And that is just not the journey that we're on currently.
Well, that part is true. When we look, every time we start to look for the typical business thing, and I'm wishing for those benevolent investors that care about our mission. They will say, oh, great. And yeah, I would donate to this, but I'm glad to see that I can make an investment instead and be able to take donations. I still am eager to see that the fourth branch, the People's Participatory branch, can stand on its own, that it has its own tax base, and that it doesn't have to even lean into government, which has its own corrupting influence, massively ensconced. And then this thing with like business people and investors is the same deal. We were just talking about before the call, the idea that, what's really most conducive to this is crowdfunding. Let's say if we're people powered, then, should probably be people powered. In every way would be the sweet spot. It's the question of how to get the breakthrough from no attention to attention, not much conviction to conviction, is really where like it hinges. And so I almost feel like, where we've got the deck and the assets ready, as if we're speaking to investors, which is really cool, actually, that we can speak to people as investors, and then we still have this kink to work out of how to get breakthrough is one of the angles we'll play. We'll certainly talk to all the investors too, but what's in the works right now in terms of the reality of your world and the last 2 months of work, right? Just so people understand what's going on the inside of the background of what it is for you and I, who might rather be doing some other things and building the platform so we can. What's the actual, work apart from cleaning your house out of mold, just so everyone can know this is not Francis's home. This is not the backdrop you usually see. Usually there's a beautiful painting in the background, and lower grade bandwidth and connectivity. The connectivity is better, but at a price. Yeah. What have you been up to? More specifically, really getting into
Let me just, before I forget, because when you say crowdfunding and the idea you were talking about earlier before we started recording, we could, if there's going to be prizes for those that help us get the word out, that we could figure out a way to directly tie those to their success in helping us crowdfund.
Yeah.
Right. Their call to action could not only be get eyeballs, it could be, here's our crowdfund, get people in on the crowdfund. And that's a pool that is going to be shared as a thought.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah.
So, all right, the last 2 months, so much distillation of what the team is doing and how that translates into a deck. And a lot of what are the things that we're concentrating on? What are the things that we're going to spend money on? Because in the deck, for those who don't know, the deck that we're looking to build is largely along the lines, although we have some minor variations of, there is a problem out there. We found a kick-ass solution to that problem. Here's our plan going forward. Here's the team that's going to do it. Here's the resources we're going to need to pull it off. And here's what we're going to do with those resources over time, starting now. Right. And with where we've aligned is, how do we approach getting participatory democracy to be not only accepted, but known about, cared about, enthused about by a substantial portion of Americans. Right now, it's less than 1%. So what would it take? The number we have is 75%, but even if we got to 25%, what would that take? Right. And when we say participatory democracy, a lot of what we're doing that's new is not being dogmatic around what form it needs to take. Meaning, there's an entire section of approaches that are really about, it needs to be a certain way. It needs to be this sort of random sortition. It needs to be X amount of scale, X kind of demography. There's another way that's like, it's all tech. It's just got to be tech. You got to use this tech. You're good. There's another that's, you need to have the right kind of deliberation. You need to have in person. It needs to be 3 acts. These are the way the 3 acts need to go. And what we're saying is, we think there's gems in all of that in the right circumstance. And let's not decide a priori which is the right circumstance for which approach. Let's get the approaches out there. Let's give people tastes of them and let them land where they need to land with the right approach for the right problem in the right circumstance. Right. That is what I think makes us unique from many folks that we've been talking to. And it also gives us unique challenges, meaning that means we have to be able to show that there's a bunch of different approaches. We need to show it's not one size fits all. We need to have different instances where they can be applied. And we need to wisely use the staff and the resources we have to make sure that we're doing enough of each to make it meaningful, but not so little of each that it gets so diluted that nobody knows what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And that's really at the point that we're at, is devising the program and figuring out how to get it out there usefully with like Common Sense Party or ranked choice voting, whoever our early partners are, generate something satisfying enough for their needs as a party or as a movement. They feel like this is worthwhile, gives people a feeling of satisfaction. Yeah, it really is. It's a lot of complexity to take the ideas that are already out there and then adapt them into something like an MVP startup where you have a minimum viable product, a really simple offering that anyone can do that also has to cross paths with movement building theory and the stuff that's really come a lot more since Seth has joined. And then just mapping more of the movement building pieces. You got to let the people out there just run with it. A great movement just inspires, gives you a basic framework, and then paint your own adventure and choose your own adventure, and just make sure you're sharing back to the community so that you can hear what's working elsewhere and maybe not miss the next right move, and let people hit the wall. I mean, I think experientially start sparking a whole bunch of leaders to do this and run experiments, but to be in a cohort, in a group that's sharing what's working, what isn't, is probably our best opportunity to generate those kinds of entrepreneurial leaders you really want at the center of things, who want to have the free reign to learn, what really works, what's conducive to them in their community. So yeah, no, that really is, that expresses a lot. So it's selling the idea in an explainer investor pitch deck, that asset's going to be useful for our leaders and for crowdfunding when we're pitching people to say, this is what we're up to, and this is where we see the business in the long run, and who the customers could be, and how big the market is, and all that stuff. It really is interesting too, just to see the potential of like 80 million people who self-describe as voters who are independent, which I take to mean really not happy with the existing system, don't like red or blue enough to say I'm not associated with that, even though all my family, tribe, and whatever are into those, I'm not. So we know it's big, and it's been this question, I think, for a lot of people, how to tap into that energy and channel it effectively towards something, which is where I think we're going. It's like this ambition and scale of it too, right? And everything in between of what we're up to, it becomes like worth the work, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know why I'm not excited to work on small local things only, but I'm not. I find myself just going, the change in you've got a 1 and a bit-year-old son. You're fully invested in the future that way. I've got my 2 daughters. I'm fully invested. My daughters don't really get it. I don't know, of like the people that you talk to, of your friends, like in your regular world, how's this landing, and what are the points of question and wonder and going like, oh my God.
Yeah. Some of the folks that I thought would be the most enthusiastic have not been, which has been interesting. I don't think for any specific reason other than like a general feeling that, well, how are you going to get people to be interested because they're already not interested, kind of thing. Like, we've been trying from our angle for however long, and people just don't care enough. And yeah, this is if you could pull it off, great. I'm not sure you're going to pull it off, right?
Same, right? I feel that too. And it really is the case when I see people at large, even my friends, people who came out for like that pancake day, and I'm got my banner up, and it couldn't be more like, it's like I'm wearing a shirt saying, talk to me about political change. And maybe I should get shirts that say that, actually. And just, there's a reason why less than 1% know about citizen assembly. There's probably in the range of 1 to 4% who care enough to really do something about politics. It's just rough numbers.
And I'd say it comes back to the very few people in the United States who do more than vote every couple years. Right. And it's very few people that do more than that. Right. It's few enough people that vote, but at least those people vote. Right. there's very few people that do more than that, that really pay attention throughout the year and get involved in whatever way they get involved. Those few people are getting something out of the system as it is currently instituted, right? The rest of the people, which is almost everybody in the United States, are not getting enough back that they want to get any more involved, right? And so our mission and our challenge is, quite frankly, and what I keep coming back to is, if people feel like their participation actually makes a difference, I believe those numbers are going to go up dramatically. I think most people don't do anything more than vote right now, because even their votes, they don't necessarily feel like count. And in California, quite frankly, in most places, except in the primary, your vote doesn't count. Yeah. Like, it's a foregone conclusion who's going to win once you get past the primary. In most districts, it's like you're done, right? And certainly in a presidential election, your California vote does not count. It's a foregone conclusion. You can vote for whoever you want for, it doesn't matter, right? California's going to go Democratic every time, right? So where does someone go to have their voice heard? And the answer is precious few places. Yeah. Even the candidacies that have been the most populist and the most cutting edge, I go back to Howard Dean with Move On. Obama and David Axelrod really figured out how to get money out of people. But as soon as they got that money in, as soon as they got in office, even though they promised, hey, we're going to listen to you, they not only didn't listen, they kicked out all the people who were on the staff who were in charge of the listening, right? They kicked out all of them, the Shepherd Ferries, and very soon the Van Joneses were, like, everybody was out, right? It's like, we don't need to listen to anybody. We got your money. Thank you very much. Even Bernie Sanders, who yes, with every request for $27 has a poll of 4 questions. Everyone knows those answers to those bubbles of the 4 questions go nowhere, but they cash every check, right? To Donald Trump, who is very good, really populist, all kinds of money flowing in, right? And never asked a question of what should the policies be. So if we are successful, and this is really what I am most excited about, is because it goes right back to where we started this conversation. I had no way of, when that bus driver told me on camera, hey, this is how you fix the buses. This is how you fix this line. This is how you fix the life of a bus driver and the life of a rider. I had nothing other to do than put that video on and hope that somebody might see it sometime, right? But now we can take that feedback and we can do a jam on how do we fix mass transit in the city of Los Angeles. And we can have the right stakeholders come in and we can actually bubble that up into something that's meaningful, right? And everyone who participates in that will have their voice heard, and they can chart where it was heard, right? I went to this event and this is what happened after this event. And then I went to this event and then we did this online voting thing, and like, it all mattered. And I think once we show people that their participation matters, it's not going to happen right away. But that's the thing that I think gets us over the hump, because people right now, quite frankly, who cares what I say? Yeah. I can go to town hall. I can go to the city council. There's the fors and againsts. I'm actually not for or against. Like, I have a very nuanced position, and this is how it goes. Nobody wants to hear that, right? Like, are you yes or no? Well, actually, it depends on the proposition. And if I had it to do it my way, this is how it would go, and it would serve everybody's purposes. We don't want to hear you. You're either union or you're anti-union. Which one are you? Neither. right? Sign me up for neither. Sometimes union stuff is great. Sometimes it gets in the way. I'm both and I'm neither. Where do I fit? Right?
Yeah.
Are you for corporations or
Depends.
anti-corporations? Both, neither.
Yeah.
Give me a situation, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because discussing what our plan is for May 31st, yesterday, and getting into the conversation about what the question should be and the action at the event with Andrew Yang, Common Sense Party and Forward Party in San Diego. It's like, I want to ask people what their favorite issues are. Duncan pushes back to like, we need to establish alignment around values and what matters to people. The party wants to know what people care about and what they want to do next. And I'm really getting, in a way, the best thing you could do in the collective choose your adventure is that there's a vote at whatever the next fork is, right, in the party. That if we can demonstrate that that actually informs the choice of Common Sense Party San Diego, that there's this fork in the road they're coming to, is like, so how are we going to get more people to actually sign up? That'd be a good question. That's the priority of the party, right? How are we going to do that? How would you do that effectively? What would be a meaningful experience for you to have that would feel worthwhile for you or your friends to feel, well, I need to be clear about a platform? Or is there another proposition? Or they participate in creating the platform or meeting their friends who share a passion. Or what was coming up in the to and fro with Duncan today was the idea that we're asking the question, what would be the most important thing that this party and your involvement could do for you? Right?
And your friends and family, because then that would get them excited.
Yeah. That's close. And if we could show that that becomes the action plan, I think that's pretty interesting, actually. So we haven't locked it down yet. We really don't.
Part of the question is, what could the Common Sense Party do that would most make you feel like you've been heard and your views are represented in the Common Sense Party?
Yeah. Yeah. And the things that you're concerned about are actually being respected and considered. And that would be different. And that would be really different. Yeah, that's a really good prompt. That's a
or even simpler, like, what could the Common Sense Party, what's the most important thing the Common Sense Party could do so that you would feel like your voice matters in this party?
That's really cool. I'm actually ordering this from a previous call, so I got a 2-hour order again.
All right.
Yeah. So starting around 1:48. Cool. I'm just going to share some of this with him and just be able to like prompt him to like, I think this is a really cool consideration. And we've already gone for like nearly a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Amazing how we do that, right?
Yeah. Let me come back, because this is relevant back to how I got to where I am. So I got tapped to be in Dennis Kucinich's first run for office when he ran for president. And I got to be there actually before he even decided to run. And I was there in Palm Springs at something called the Association for Global New Thought. So essentially New Agers, where he was giving a keynote, and a bunch of folks went out to dinner with him and were pressuring him, goading him, asking him, are you going to run for president? And some of the folks around that table were Marianne Williamson and Barbara Marx Hubbard and a handful of other, Illuminati in the New Age world. And Dennis was very cagey and wouldn't say anything at that time, but not so long afterwards, I got a call from one of the gentlemen who was at that table, and he said, Dennis is going to run. I'm in charge of figuring out a new kind of campaign that we're going to run. That doesn't look like other political campaigns. We're going to come together up in Marin and hash that out. Do you want to come? Of course I want to come. Let's go. And then after that, so the big takeaway was we're going to have circles, and we're going to use this new technology. Again, Howard Dean was about to start with Meetup. We were using something called Friendly Favors, which was built in Marin, which unfortunately nobody's ever heard of, and part of the reason why we never took off. But we had this idea around circles, which is not too dissimilar from what we're talking about here with People Power, which is start with your circle, as small as you need it to be, grow it, find ways for other people to want to get involved, and find where your circle starts to intersect with other circles around the state, right? Where's the intersection? Have people sit in, if they belong in more than one circle, make sure one circle's talking to another, talking to a bigger circle, but giving people a reason to show up in person, talk to each other, right? Now, with no budget, and when I say no budget, I mean literally no budget, they were basically like, here, everything Fresno South, have a good time, figure it out, get people to talk to each other, go visit people, have them make circles, do it. Here's a pen, here's some paper, here's some markers, go. The interesting thing is, again, at the time, it's all well and good to have a dozen, 2 dozen. Sometimes we had maybe 40 people get together. I remember one that was like, we had like 50 people down near the border in San Diego. So you come together and you all got your ideas. And then what? How does the campaign meaningfully let you know that you've been heard? Right? And quite frankly, there was no way at that time for us to do that. We had no mechanism to bubble up an idea that might have been, 8 circles might have been like, this is the thing you need to concentrate on. And that didn't happen. But even if it did, we had no way to do anything with that one idea that 8 circles that said, this is the most important thing, right? Now, with People Power, we have that capability. Right. And I think what we can start to do is, if this is the question or part of the question for common sense in San Diego, is okay, we've got 500 people in this room. Let's bubble up the top 3 things that would have you feel like this meeting was the most meaningful political gathering you've ever been to, right? Wouldn't one of them be that the party has implemented a mechanism so that every time we have a meeting, the best ideas bubble up, and that we now know amongst our various meetings which are the ideas that are bubbling up? If common sense implemented that, wouldn't that be the most kick-ass thing that ever happened to you in a political meeting in your entire life? Right? And if not, tell us the other things that would be. Because certainly I've been to a lot of political meetings. Nothing like that has ever happened.
Yeah.
All I've ever gotten is, oh, great, you showed up. You paid $20 or $200 to get here. Awesome. You're listening to what our platform is. Awesome. Take a yard sign, go home, tell your friends, put up your sign, get someone else to volunteer, make some phone calls, get them to donate. I got a lot of ideas around like this district and how things could be better. Great. Write them on a piece of paper, put them like,
gone,
that's
right?
it.
Gone and ignored.
Right?
Yeah, no, that would be cool if there's a mechanism, and even to really respectfully explain why other things were decided, or that we've got to continue the conversation or whatever it is. And I think that's to get Andrew enrolled to see the power of this as a demonstrable way of giving people an experience and really demonstrating the difference and getting the benefit of starting to create the infrastructure to build, platform and to select candidates. So it's not done in a vacuum or just by the higher ups deciding or just like the 10 people who show up. It's got to be some mechanism for really doing democracy within the party itself. Otherwise, the party is mirroring the same structural deficiencies that we have, which is a few people highly invested with the ability and the time and the money make most of the decisions, and everyone else is told to come along for the ride. And that's not it.
I think that, to me, what turns off a lot of people to American politics first, right, is, my opinion, you get a megaphone, you get a person with a megaphone or a TV ad or whatever it is that is like got a fire hose of their ideas coming at you. And you're like, okay, I guess yours are a little bit better than the other ones, but most of them actually really suck, right? But I have no option. But you've been trained to be a candidate, which is, I'm going to make you believe, and Obama was the best at this, right? I'm going to make you believe that whatever I'm saying is exactly what you think, even though we know that I'm not going to do most of what I'm saying, and what I'm saying really doesn't comport with what you think, but I'm going to make you believe that it does. Perfect candidate as orator, right? Yeah. Which for the town square and for when you needed that, fantastic. We don't need that anymore. What we need now as candidate is listener, right? And so if we can help make that paradigm shift so that we absolutely reverse the way candidates are chosen, meaning first common sense party listens, and the people that are attracted to the common sense party say, these are the things we care about. Great. Now we know. And then the common sense party says, okay, now we're going to groom the people who are the best listeners to enact the platform that the people have told us they want enacted. And then it doesn't matter so much if you are an amazing spokesperson, because you're no longer trying to convince everybody that they believe what you believe. What you're saying is, I've heard what you believe, I'm incorporating that, and I'm going to help get it enacted to the best of my ability.
Yeah. I really feel like it's like the slogan could even be, we're listening. We're listening.
That would be amazing.
Right?
We listen. Common sense party. We listen. That would set them off from every other political party, with the maybe exception of Podemos.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think it would be, and at least as a slogan for the kind of events and the moments, it'll be fun to try that stuff out. I think these are some of the super generative ideas of what's going to happen next. These events as model events, building momentum for the one in Topanga. Put out the word to a bunch of people actually about lining it up 4 to 6 p.m. on May 21st.
All right.
Dates, the stake is in the ground. Talk to a couple like community leaders to get them into the thought of it, and people who can help with media, Darius and others, and awesome. Andrea Freeman. And so I felt like, the pieces are coming together. I'm excited. Yeah. So what's next? What do you feel like where it's going to go for you next in terms of like what gets manifested for you in this whole thing?
Like next, like what are we going to create in the next 20 days next?
Or the next 40 days, the next 60 days?
Well, we're going to have a kick-ass deck out. We're going to start talking to people and seeing where it's landing and where it's not quite landing. And this will quite frankly be the first time we're out there with materials saying, how are you going to get involved? Right? Because we haven't done that yet. And really starting to see where people will and will not. And for me, that also combines with, what are the concretes of this thing? What does it mean to have people participate, right? And be rewarded for their participation in concrete terms, right? What are those rewards? How does that start to land? What are the legal structures that let us do that, right? So really putting structure to all the ambitions that we have continues to be what is top of mind for me, right?
I think we're getting closer to. It's fun to have that conversation with Jason Weiner and more collaborative enterprise ownership DAO type model. There's something in there that really is interesting and calling. We'll see what happens with that one. I'm excited for that too. Yeah, and really getting out there really is the next thing. Getting out there and seeing. There's going to be a bunch of people who are going to be like, no, it's too big. Other people are like, I don't think anyone cares. And then there's going to be a couple. And that's that. It's almost like auditioning with the freaking world, right? You got to go out there and just be like, what do you think? And you like just get one. I mean, getting Seth was such a gold, right? Okay, I'm on the same mission, citizen assembly as soon as freaking possible. I'm like, whoa, I got another one. There's another one out there who believes, who just has the conviction that the problems and the crises and the challenges are so big, so entrenched. What's the workaround? What's the way? And he's just like, citizen assembly as soon as possible as a national thing. It's like, boom, right? And even pulling the goalpost bigger and closer to say national system of citizen assembly by July 4th, 2026. I was just looking it up today. I was like, how many constitutional amendments are there? 27? Oh, right. This would be 28. Right?
The big one.
That's a big one. Yeah. Fourth branch.
And, in terms of me, look, like there's certainly an inner Abby Hoffman in me that loves getting people riled up and getting them excited and letting them really let their imagination go to how they could make a difference and really, I want to do that, right? And for me in this context, even when I say, Common Sense Party is the party that listens. So where is the role for the orators, right? Because there's still a role. It's a slightly different role.
Freaking listen, okay?
But where is that role, right? And where are those of us who like to engage people and like to inspire people? Where does that fit in a sense of yes, and we want to be listening as much as we're talking, right? It's very
the
interesting.
enrollment. It's the enrollment. It's the convening. It's getting people pumped up. It's celebrating the people in the room who've created things. It's the role of the really good MC at the wedding. It's not about the MC at the wedding. It's about the bride and the groom and the best man, and that's more the vibe, I think, right? Make it funny, make it delightful, charming, all those skills that we kind of have in those moments, those are really going to be coming to the fore, I feel, because everything we do, if we do it in this collaborative way, I mean, it's like today was a great exercise for me, really just like, I'm loving this path that's next for the storytelling, which is just to get with the team, understand what people are lighting up about. And hearing that from you reminds me of that role that we have, that I see almost the whole team moving into, more of evangelist, facilitator, leader in this new model of leadership, that we're each examples and models of that and going out into the world. Once you get steeped in the philosophy of it, then it's like, it has to be by example and experience.
Yeah. And, let me segue into, we mentioned my almost 17-month-old son now. And I certainly want him to have every opportunity in the world. And quite frankly, right now in the United States, it's a tall order right now to say, like, you've got every opportunity. There's preschools, and not even very good preschools in LA, that cost more for a year than I paid for 4 years of college, right? Let alone what it's going to cost when he gets to college in the United States, right? What kind of society are we creating right now, right? There's options for anyone in my shoes right now. One option is cut and run, like go to Costa Rica, live high on the hog. Living's cheap, get a lot of stuff done. Another option is try to make an ungodly sum of money, because if you're rich enough in America, then everything is available to you, right?
Yeah.
The option I'm in right now is, and the reason I ran for office is I and the people that I am surrounded by, one of whom is right here on this call with me, and others are on our team, and others are friends and allies. We have the mechanisms at our fingertips to make serious systemic change. It doesn't mean we're going to succeed, but we have the capability. And if we don't do it, who's going to do it? So where I'm at is, how do I maximize every day so that we're getting closer to having the resources to do this at the scale that it requires, so that when my son wants to go to school, he can go to an excellent school, an elementary school, a high school, a college, and that there are not massive systemic barriers to him or to anyone else, right? And part of that means he doesn't get shot in school, right? So we've rearranged our society so that we're not shooting up our schools and killing our children by the dozens.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're great. They're an excellent experience. That it's as good in the public system as it is in the private. Because when you go into those private schools, whether it's Waldorf or the private, whatever, most of the facilities aren't even better. The bare facilities, the building, the structure, the access to, yards and sports facilities and whatever, it's not even better at most of the private schools. So what is it that's missing that we can't have the system work well? And in every way, in every scale of the society, it's like that. I love what you just shared and the way you spoke it to the camera too. We're definitely I'm gonna made a note to Denise and Kylie pull that one out, because I think that was juicy.
And another piece of that is, can we leave Ludo, my son, a system where he is listened to, right? Where tuning out of politics is no longer cool. We're tuning in and having a say, and really having a say, right? Because honestly, when someone says to me, I don't vote because my vote doesn't matter, it's very hard for me to actually, it really does matter, because in most cases it really fucking doesn't, right? But I gotta believe that, like, the bare minimum, I gotta get people to at least do the bare minimum. But what if it really did matter? Like, what if participation really did matter? What if it did have an impact? What then could my son and all of his people who are his age and younger, what could they achieve if their voices counted, and if they really had a degree of power? And, I know that, Scott, this is for you, like you'll say it, we could, 20 years from now, we could have a planet full of climate refugees, and we could have water world times 100, or we could have a thriving, green, regenerative planet. And that's largely based on what kind of upbringing a few billion children have right now.
Yeah.
Right. So it's up to us to decide what kind of upbringing are they going to have. We get to create it right now.
Yeah, very good. I think that's a good place to wind up. Great share. Really good, really good to drop in always. Such a appreciative of your contribution in every way, and your conviction and commitment to it, and just the way we've been working together and taking a stand. And I hope you feel freely enough to be able to speak your voice and be heard yourself in the process. It's been a great adventure so far. I'm looking forward to whatever comes next. So I think it's only going to get better, bigger, and more wild as we go.
Yeah, more wild for sure.
Yeah. All right, man.
All right.
I'm going to wind up the record.
Great.
And we'll see you all next week, I guess. I don't even know if there's any time related to this thing. Let me stop the recording. Stop the live stream.